All right. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another virtual art club. My name is Michaela, art educator for the Burchfield Penney Art Center. And tonight I have three amazing artists with me to talk about our topic of creative block. So I'm going to do quick introductions to everyone who's here. So first we have Chantal Calato. She grew up in Niagara Falls, New York, where it was normal to see growing landfills next to your school or grocery store. She spent her childhood a stone's throw away from the infamously toxic Love Canal. The industrial history of Niagara Falls has left a lasting scar on the land, its people, and Chantal, and has been a major focus of her art for a long time. Her work has been in venues including the Castellani Art Museum, Trimania, Buffalo Museum of Science, Art Park, and the Grain Silos for City of Night in Buffalo. After college, she spent a while designing massive warehouse parties and outdoor spectacles for Chicago's Red Moon Theater. And her hand-engineered costumes were worn at the official White House Halloween party in DC during President Obama's administration. She's had an MFA in stage design from Northwestern University and has a BFA from University of Buffalo. And her sculpture, Mount Seathos, am I saying that right?
Mount Seathos.
Seathos, thank you, is a part of our art and craft media show. Next, we have Shanel Kerekes. Shanel is a painter from Buffalo, New York. She's a graduate from Villa Maria College. She majored in integrated arts and obtained a BFA degree in 2019. She was first introduced to art as a child by her grandfather, who often created portraits as a hobby. She too gave painting a chance and quickly turned into a passion. She became inspired by the work of contemporary artist Kiki Smith and surrealist painter Salvador Dali. Photorealism is the style that she continuously aspires to achieve in her work. And last but not least, we have Frederick Wright Jones. Frederick is a multimedia artist and educator. He spends his time traveling between Allentown, Pennsylvania and Hamburg, Germany, the home of his life companion. Frederick's family is a vital part of his life. He's currently an assistant professor of sculpture at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He studied at Rhode Island School of Design and the University of Pennsylvania, and he received his MFA from SUNY Buffalo. On his way to teaching alongside raising a family and continuing his artistic research, Frederick has 13 years of experience working as a rope-supported arborist. The inherent risk, team-oriented dynamic, exposure to the elements, and intensity with material connected to urban forestry all feed to his sculptural practice. And his works, his sculptures, Goodbyes and Blood and Dirt, Once Upon a Time in the So-Called West, and he's single-handedly dispersed East German protesters. Those are sculptures also in the exhibition Art and Craft Media that is currently up at our museum. So welcome.
Hi.
Thank you. Hello.
Quick spiel to all of you here. So tonight we're going to talk about creative block. And so my first question to you all is, what is creative block to you? Who wants to go first?
I can go first. To me, creative block is when you're struggling to come up with new ideas for your craft, and you feel just kind of stuck. And I've had many, many battles with creative block, and this is a totally normal thing that can happen for any type of artist, no matter what you are. So it's completely normal and bound to happen.
I'll jump in. So I feel like I've had creative block manifest itself in a few different ways. Sometimes it's been in physical ways, like I physically am just like so challenged by the idea that I have that becomes a block. Sometimes it's a financial block. And I would say most often it's a mental block. So perhaps maybe a little bit more along the lines of what Shanel was talking about. And not that the other two can't be a huge impediment, but my brain is probably the largest impediment when it comes to being creative, both good and bad.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that you both were saying. I actually never use the term creative block, but I'll say, I'm not inspired or I don't know what to do. These sort of things, like Shanel said, they always come back again. There's times where you're just producing and your ideas are flowing out of your head. And then there's times where it just, what do I do? Why am I here? What's the purpose? Why art even? That's a question. So it just manifests it's differently. But I think that, that term, it applies to artists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting that all three of you kind of follow that same theme of like, it's kind of like a lack of ideas or just you're not feeling inspired enough to like jump into a project or like physically blocked, like Chantal said. So how do you overcome that? So is there something you do? Is it you just wait and see? How do each of you handle it?
Well, a way that manifests it for me personally is in a lack of ideas specifically. So I tend to directly go to Google Images, stock images, but even before that, I'll comprise a word map of something that's pressing on my mind or a memory that I have that I'd like to make a painting out of somehow, or a feeling that I currently have. But from there, I take the words and phrases from the word map and I'll plug them into Google Images and try to comprise a folder essentially of these images so I can use them as reference. So then I can begin to assemble them into a composition for a future painting. So that's kind of what I do for when I'm struggling with a lack of ideas.
I've actually found more often I have too many ideas and that blocks me more than anything, because I then am finding myself flailing or trying to figure out which direction I should be focusing in. And so actually a few years ago, I think it was in maybe 2017, I started at the beginning of the year. I was just so all over the place that I said, I need to create a theme for this year to get me moving forward. And I made that first theme for that year focus. And at the time I was working on Unseen that was open at the Burchfield Penney last year, my installation. And this project was such a huge endeavor for me. And I undertook so many different aspects of art making, like medium wise, that I had never done before. And so when all these other ideas for other projects and opportunities kept popping up in my head and swirling around, I would always go back to that word and say, okay, what am I focusing on Unseen? Am I focusing on this? If I take this job or if I do this side project, is it going to further that other project for me? And so creating that theme for the year was really helpful. And then I went on and I did it the next couple of years until we hit the pandemic, and I kind of fell off of that. But I plan on going back to that. So now bringing it up, maybe I will in 2022. It was very helpful.
For me, there's lots of there's lots of reasons to sort of not be able to go forward. And sometimes, for example, fear. Sometimes I'm afraid of messing something up or not doing it right. And, I've just found, of course I can wait and I can plan, but I just have to jump into it usually and hope for the best. A lot of my work, what I'm doing is something that I've never done before. So I'll be quite honest, I don't know how to do it, right? I'm doing it for the first time. So, I can do a certain amount of research, but often just like going in there and failing is the only way to actually get through, right? And do it wrong twice maybe. And then the third time it works. Sometimes the first time it works. There's, of course, there's also those times where the only thing that works is taking a nap.
Yeah, the fear thing really speaks to me as well. And I think it comes in the form of lack of self-confidence. And it's something that I've had to work on really, really hard and try to, overcome. But like there were times, especially working on Unseen, in the early days, especially when I was like looking for a venue to put Unseen, I was used to like sending emails and like, timidly sending emails to different venues or people and never getting responses and getting really down and depressed about never getting a response for a long, long time. And then at some point it just clicked in my head, like, wait a second, I keep doing the same thing over and over and I'm not getting a different result, that whole thing. And so finally I realized, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to start cold calling people. But for me, I'm like terrified. Like that's like the scariest thing in the world for me is cold calling. But that's what I started doing. I started cold calling people and venues. I started just showing up at events to find people to talk to and see them face to face. And it was the scariest thing every single time I did it. But it paid out in the end. And it has slowly like chipped away at my fear and lack of self-confidence. So I guess just trying something different than you don't usually do is maybe helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I think fear and self-confidence are so related to one another. I know sometimes for me, when I start comparing myself to other artists, it's kind of intimidating. Like, is their idea achieved better than mine? Like were their images already incorporated that I can't use them now? I get worried that my sketches have already been done. So I find myself struggling with feeling like my art isn't truly original and it's already been done before. So the way I kind of overcome that is kind of avoiding social media and sometimes entirely, and it's okay to take a break. So it helps me think more independently and freely. So I think that's a big help to help balance that.
Well, what you're saying is really like makes me think about, and this was actually like the question I was wondering, like as this whole thing started, and this is a question I ask my students all the time: what is creativity, right? And right, you were both talking about new ideas, trying new things out. Is it original, right? Like the novelty of an artwork is so important, right? That it's something nobody has ever seen, right? But like we're so surrounded by images every day. Like, is it possible even to make something new, right? And so I'm trying to think like creativity, like could it be, right? Because ideas are out there. We're surrounded by them and we can just grab them. Sometimes for me, the simplest idea is the best. And I guess there's something about like, I'm always pondering these questions, like what does an artist actually do? And, there's a lot about experience, and I think we each see the world differently, and sort of that willingness to say, this is what I see, and I'm sharing it, right? I think that, a lot of that, just this willingness to communicate through our work, through our hands, through our eyes. Maybe that's something that goes along this idea of creativity, and then of course creative block. I don't know. That's just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that really like hits home of, you all overcome it differently, but you're all having the same challenges, like that lack of confidence, that too many ideas or lack of ideas, but it all contributes to like your creativity. And eventually you do create something from that in the aftermath, right? Shanel touched on my next question. Does social media play a positive or negative role? And like, do you use it to push through a creative block or not?
Well, I can expand on that. I believe that it's a wonderful tool when it comes to breaking artist block, but like I mentioned, it can also play a role in your confidence as an artist and have influence on your own creativity. And it will affect everyone differently. You can find some excellent images for references, of course, but then there's that comparing aspect again, or you feel like someone achieved your idea better, or than you could, and it can be kind of intimidating. So I believe that finding that balance between what kind of social media sites you choose to go on, it can help avoid that that inferior feeling within yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I could go down a dark hole with social media. I try to keep my footprint relatively simple or small. And I have like I really only go on Instagram at this point, but even then I have found myself similarly like comparing, or feeling like, oh, that artist creates so much more and I'm just so slow, everything I do takes forever, or look at how many shows they have, and you find yourself doing that. But then in reality, like everybody's social media account is just one curated sliver of their life, and we all have to remember that, I guess. It's only what they want you to see from their life, and not all of that other garbage that we all have to deal with. And I think so that's it's yeah, I think there are positives to it. Like I was able to connect with a couple other artists in Buffalo recently through social media, and we then were able to meet in person, one being Kurt Treby, who's also in the art and craft media. So when we finally met in person, we had already felt like we knew each other a little bit, which was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's like a weird positive to
it's
to
a weird
media.
It was weird, very strange. Yes, but a good strange. It was good.
Yeah, I'm just on Instagram too. I'm 46. I just don't do much social media, but I do find that social aspect, right? I mean, so much of my artistic practice is like alone in the studio, and so being able to sort of share that and see what other people are doing, and like you said, connect with people that you haven't seen in years. You're like, oh, look, I know them, and be able to send a message and be like, hey, okay, I'm gonna be in the area. Are you still around? Are you interested? We haven't seen each other in 20 years, right? So that's kind of nice. But so I'm looking back at one of the questions was like creative block and a lack of time, and that's the biggest thing, is that time sucker. Like Instagram, you just like scroll down, and that I just have to, sometimes I gotta deinstall it from my telephone, and just because I'm spending too much time on this.
I always set those like time. I have like a timer set on those apps, so I get like a limited amount of time, and then my phone's like, no more.
Yeah, seriously.
So you talked about finding inspiration. So where do you look for sources? So if you're overcoming it, like Shanel commented, she said she goes to like Google Images to like kind of put something together, or like word maps. What are your other sources to find inspiration for that next project?
Well, besides that, oh man, I think just having conversations with people in person, like other artists, and they can relate to you. They understand what it's like, the frustration. They might have the same medium that they work in with you, especially when you can connect on that level. It's even better because they get it. They get, like, for me, painting photorealistically, it is a very extensive process that takes hours and dozens of hours just to complete one painting that's like 11 by 14, very small. But yeah, I think just having connections to people who understand really help with that.
I would say that most of my inspiration comes from the environment that I'm surrounded in, and that's both when I say environment, that could either be like, for example, like you mentioned, I grew up near Love Canal, So a lot of my work is inspired by living in an industrial area and how that's affected people. But also some other work that I haven't really put out into the world yet that I create is inspired by my very immediate environment. So my house. So for example, if my toddler takes all the spices and dumps them out onto the floor, that is now becoming inspiration for me. And I actually realized that's becoming more so since I had a kid, because I have less time, which is a creative block. So I do need to look around me more closely than in a way that I did before. Yeah. And actually I moved into, and one other thing real quick, I moved into this house in Buffalo, about a year ago now. And, my toddler tested positive for lead in her system at her 1 year birthday or 1 year, appointment. And so we had our house tested for lead, and one of the areas that was super high in lead was actually the soil right outside of our house, because all these old Buffalo homes were painted with lead paint. And if you think about decades of rain chipping the paint off and going into the ground, they actually said it was a brown field. That's how bad it was. So we had to dig out the dirt, the top layer of dirt in the back of our house. And I kept a bucket of this dirt. It's in the garage right now. And I'm like, what's this going to become? It's going to become something, but I'm not sure what yet.
I had to piggyback on both of you, right? Because I use word maps, mind maps, and location, right? Where I am physically, as far, on a geographical level, but also this notion of time, like my location within history, memory, and how these things converge. I love to take walks, and my thoughts come easier when I walk, and then to map these things out, whether in words, whether in mind maps, whether actual topographic maps, is sort of locating myself is a big part of my process. Looking at the area, the landscape, current events, pop culture, and how these things relate to history, to family, to myths of nation, things like that, right?
Has there ever been a time where you were either in like a time crunch to get something done, or you just had to kind of like force yourself to be creative and to get a project done? And did that work out for you positively or negatively?
Yeah, time crunch.
Yeah, I mean, many time crunches, that's for sure. And I mean, this is the thing. In my case, like if that time crunch is outside of my control, like I'm given a deadline, but I have control of when I do my work and whatever, that's usually a somewhat positive. It's good to have some pressure there. But I don't like if I put myself in the position of the time crunch, like if I procrastinated, then it's not a good feeling, and it actually backfires. Like then I feel like that, yeah. So it's a tricky, there's a balance to having just the right amount of pressure there. And I think some practice helps figure that out for each person, I'm sure.
Yeah, procrastination ever since I was in high school has been a problem. But working under pressure helps me 100%. Like that makes me want to do it and complete it. I have a lot of other interests. So when I'm not pressed for time, I tend to sway into the other things that I like. And I don't so much focus on the art I have started or have yet to get started. But yeah, the pressure creates total focus. And I don't think it specifically works for artist block, because then I'm rushing into a design. just to have one. And that means it's not going to be the strongest version of it. So really having the time to break the creative block in a healthy way is, I think, the best thing, so it can be formulated properly and more thought out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's also the thing, like, to separate like planning, making, and analyzing. And so for the creative block, that planning part, right, I do often need sort of that peace of mind, that slow sort of approach. In the making part, right, seems like there's always a time crunch. I mean, it's not true, all we have is time, but, you know, still, I think it might be in my head partially. But, you know, it seems like historically, right, it always gets done, right, for some reason, and God willing, that will continue, right? Something's working out.
So this
Yeah,
next one,
oh, sorry, if I could just throw one last little tidbit in. I just thought of one thing that I couldn't think of before, which is I had this idea for a series of paintings, and it sat in my head for 6 years. And then finally I had a summer off, actually between teaching, and I booked a little show in Buffalo here. This was back in like 2015, I think. And I said, I'm going to create this series of paintings. And I had 1 month to do it. And I painted 11 paintings, some of which were really pretty big, but it was the most I had painted ever in 1 month period by far. But having that, you know, in my head for 6 years, and then to do all of that was just like it was just spilling out of me, which to having that little deadline was very, very helpful.
Yeah,
Very
that's
helpful.
like, to work under that kind of pressure for a 1 month deadline that's a lot.
Yes.
So this is a big question, or it's long. So some people might be familiar. There's a quote from Picasso that is, "Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." What does it mean to break the rules? What does that mean to you and what you do in your practice? Or is that even something you have heard of, or a mantra you even stand by? And do you have your own personal rules that you follow when you're creating?
Let's see. Well, I think it means, like, I think that quote basically means, like, if you master your craft as best as you can, you could break them all. Like, you could break all the rules. You could skip things. You could add things to them. You could take parts out. One rule that in my painting process that I found myself breaking recently is skipping the underpainting for my paintings, which a lot of painters would be like, what? Like, that's the foundation of the painting. How do you do that? But I've been just going in with color right away and start piecing it together. And I've gotten so comfortable with doing underpaintings that I just take them out now. But it works for me. And if it works for you, then there shouldn't be any rules to art, I think, in general. If it works for you, any process goes, you know?
I would say that breaking the rules is not feeling like you have boundaries. And when I say that, I have had a lot of naysayers over the years about my ideas and what I want to accomplish and do. And a lot of times it's because I've worked in so many mediums, and they're like, but you're a sculptor and a photographer. You can't do audio. You've never done that before. And I then go on to do it. And I think I like to then take a little bit of pride in the fact that, you know, I can overcome what these naysayers are doing or saying to me. I guess I don't break rules just to break rules for breaking rules' sake. But I do like to challenge myself as an artist and as a human being to continuously try new things and do different things and push forward in my creations.
I mean, I understand what the quote means, and I work with wood, but I'm not a woodworker. You know, I would even say I paint, but I'm not a painter. I I do all these things. For me, what keeps me going is keeping it interesting, right? And there has to be a certain amount of, maybe that's breaking the rules, maybe it's learning new rules. Something has to sort of spark my curiosity. I think curiosity is a big part of my practice, trying to figure things out. I've always sort of looked at the world a little bit from a distance. I was that weird kid, and right, so like, just like trying to figure things out, like as if I'm just a little bit off. And so that sort of curiosity, I've tried to maintain that, or maybe I've been forced to maintain it. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I am, way I'm put together. And so the breaking the rules, and I think Picasso's talking about understanding the rules. I have never really understood the rules, and so I can relate to that, but in a very different way, I think, to the way it's meant.
Yeah, that's really interesting that, like, maybe there's just no rules. You're never given the rule book, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
If you could go back to high school and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I would tell myself that you need to be more confident in what you're doing, and it takes time to get better at what you do. Like, don't feel like you have to be just good in a week, or like really good, really fast at whatever medium you work in. Like, it takes time to get, comfortable with the medium you're working with. You get to learn what process works best for you. It might be way different than your neighbors, but just really take time to reflect on what is working and what's not. And to just not lose confidence if it's not going at the pace that you would like it to.
I was actually, one of my naysayers over the years was my grandfather, especially when I was in high school and getting ready to go to college. And it was particularly hard for me to hear it coming from him, because he was a creative individual who was an entrepreneur and had a very successful business being a creative. And but then later on, once he started to realize that I could actually make something out of being an artist, he started to say to me, do what you love and never give up. And that really stuck with me, because it meant a lot at that point, especially coming from him, that I turned the tide with him. But I kind of wish that I could go back in time and have him say that to me versus me say that to me. But if I were to go back, I would say that to me. I would say, do what you love and never give up.
Yeah, I tell myself to practice conscious listening, and listening to other people, but like actually trying to, like, in high school, of course I listened, but actually to understand what people are trying to say, to ask questions, to dig deep. That's something that I've learned in my age, and it's a very it's a quality that I wish I had at a younger age.
So as we get to some of my couple last questions, is there any question that I didn't ask that you would have liked me to ask during this? Or is there anything we didn't bring up about creative block that you had in your mind?
Well, I kind of asked it, and so I want to ask Shanel and Chantal, what is creativity to you?
Oh, it's a big question.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's hard. No, it's a great question. Creativity to me is taking any idea that you have and choosing to focus on it and expanding it so it doesn't mean it so literally. So you're trying to make it more of like a metaphor or something more subtle, but it has that deeper meaning at the end of the day. I think that's the
Yeah.
best thing I come up
Yeah.
with.
Oh man, it's a hard one. I mean, I could go on and or think about it forever, really. But I think it's something about, or I feel like I'm at my best creatively when I let go. There's something about kind of letting yourself be like as if you're in kindergarten again, letting go of the things that you learned over all of these years and just doing. I know that's not a very, but yeah. So like taking all that experience, but then also letting it go. And maybe there's something about breaking the rules in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna answer it. So as I an art educator for the museum, and I'm you teach kids art. I feel like a lot of times you've come across some teachers that will drive you into one direction, like they're making you focus creativity on a single thing. But I think creativity is whatever you're passionate about. It doesn't equal, like, creativity doesn't equal painting, and it doesn't equal sculpture. It's whatever gives you intrinsic value, right? That nothing that is extra, you're not getting anything from the outside world because you're making your art. It's because you're doing it for yourself. So that's what I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So my last question for everyone before we close out.
Thanks for answering that. Right.
Yeah.
That was sort of reverse.
Yeah.
Interview. I like that.
You're welcome. That was a great question.
Good answer.
Good answer. My last question before we close up the evening is, where can students find you online? If you have websites or Instagram handles, where can they find you? And you can put them in the chat, and they should pop up on the recording too.
Okay. Yeah. You can find me guys at Shanel Kerekes Art on Instagram. Same goes for Facebook. It's Shanel Kerekes Art, and then my website, ShanelKerekesArt.com. So it's all the same thing, nice and easy.
That's nice that they're all the same.
Yes, my website is ChantalCalato.com, and my Instagram is Chantal Calato. And if anyone saw or was interested in the project I was talking about at the Burchfield Penney Unseen, I actually still have a live website for that project, unseen-voices.com. And I will type these in the chat.
Great. Yes. And so is there any art shows that you're currently in? So Chantal and Frederick are currently in the Art and Craft Media Show at the Burchfield Penney, which closes on November 28th. Shanel, are you currently in any exhibitions right now?
Not currently, but I will be having a solo exhibition at El Museo next spring or summertime of next year.
I love that place.
Yeah, right heart to Buffalo.
You can find me on fwrightjones.com or on Instagram at Frederick Wright Jones. I also got a YouTube channel, Frederick Wright Jones. And right now, exhibition just started here in Allentown, Pennsylvania at the Martin Art Gallery. That's a group show of Muhlenberg faculty. So if you're in Allentown, check it out.
I will also add those links onto the webpage too. So when I upload this video to our website, I'll have all your social media links and websites and those exhibitions linked too, so people can find you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much.
This was such a great virtual art club. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for.
It was a lot of fun, and it was nice meeting you guys.
It was nice meeting
you too.
Virtually.
Great discussion.
All right,
that's
have
also
a good night,
inspiration
everyone.
for me, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Meeting with artists.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.